It's Sunday, the 19th of August 2018. It's obviously been a very poor few weeks for the gold price, and a lot of the gold stocks have been breaking down as well. We've crossed through some key support levels in this sort of 1250 to 1200 range with a lot of ease, very little buying coming in at those levels. I have been moving out of some of my gold stocks just as a precaution. I think I reckon there might be a bit of a snapback due here in the short term. The dollar index, which I'll talk about in a minute, starting to look a bit, everyone's getting on one side of the boat again, which leads me to think that potentially this is a turning point. One thing I wanted to mention was these sort of drawn these channels here, these downtrending channels, and the sentiment in the market right now is very similar to end of 2016, post Trump, when everyone was bullish on the U.S. economy, U.S. dollar. Everyone's on one side of the boat again, dumping gold, and that was when we saw the low there at about 11.25. You can see here when it starts to get a bit disorderly. Just get my perspective here. That when it starts to get disorderly, you get this sort of downtrending channel, and then when you break toward the downside of that channel, as we saw then and as we've seen now, tends to be near a low. That's kind of that capitulation point where the market, just doesn't want to know about it. And I think, particularly with a lot of this Turkey stuff going on in the last couple of weeks, we're really getting to that sort of point in the gold market, and I think the US dollar is starting to, everyone's bullish, and this is the exact same sort of stuff we were talking about here, and I'm not sure if it's really justified, particularly if you look at the chart of the dollar index. So I've drawn a couple of, this chart's a bit better. I think it's some of the information's a bit more accurate and the historical information than the pro real-time data feed. But I think there's this perception that maybe now these dollar bulls are coming out of the woodwork again and saying, we're in this period here in the late 90s dollar bull market. We've still got plenty of upside. We're going to go back up to 110, 115 or whatever. But my perception of this, and I think a lot of a lot of this goes into, have to look at some of the other markets as well. But when I look at the US stock market and interest rates and the US economy in general, I don't believe we are here. I think we're more likely to have seen the top in the US dollar and seen the top in the stock market, which I'll talk about in a minute, or very near a top. And I think we're going to start trending down again. So my belief is that we're more likely in this period here, which was the late stage of the interest rate hiking cycle in before the GFC, and then when the economy started to turn over, the dollar starts to fall as well. Obviously there's a lot of relative strength to other markets here, but my perception for a long time is we're in this sort of period here where we might be seeing a rally, but it's a bear market rally in the US dollar, and we're going to start going lower again. If you look at the price action, this is the weekly chart, but it's everyone's talking about this sort of, we've only had that 1 or 2 weeks of that breakout above that 95 sort of level where we'd been sitting at for about 2 months, and everyone's sort of jumped on immediately and said, this is the dollar bull market again. We're going a lot higher, but we've only had, as I said, only a couple of weeks into that. So it seems like in markets these days, everyone jumps to one side extremely quickly, perhaps more quickly than they have in the past. And that's, this is not a particularly strong looking chart this week on the dollar index. It's really had a bit of a bearish reversal signal. And I did read some analysis that showed when you have these huge up bars breakout on the dollar index, this actually tends to be toward the close to a turning point down in the market. It's not, you saw it here again in late 2017. You had that breakout above sort of 94 and everyone's jumped on, and then we've turned down again lower. So it's not, there's nothing to say that this is it did break out above this key sort of 95 level where we've been sitting at for a while, but that doesn't mean we're going to 105. And I think everyone's jumped on, and I think this Turkey thing has really pushed that higher. And then we've got the all these emerging market fears and everything, and there's obviously something to that, but that doesn't, I'm not certain that the dollar index is moving higher just based on this chart. It does not look that's a strong bearish reversal this week. We know Trump doesn't want a high dollar. So he wants a high dollar because he can hurt it's sort of leverage over other markets, I guess, and other countries where he's constantly got feuds. But we know that he said he was wanted a lower dollar generally, and that's good for US trade purposes. So I think if the dollar starts to rise higher, I think you're likely to see him starting to jawbone it back down again. And he's trying to. The Chinese are. He's obviously playing games with the Chinese on trade as well, and I think that might blow up soon. But yeah, I don't see I don't see that dollar looking very strong on the chart, and that's I think potential for every dollar commodities market has struggled in the last couple of weeks. Some of the copper price and a lot of the metals are just as weak as the gold price. So I think potentially there's a turning point here in the gold price and the US dollar. Some of the other ones, the S&P 500, bit of a broken record in this. I've still been talking about this. We're still in that high. We tried to make a bit of an attempt in the last couple of weeks higher. Didn't make it again. No real signs of strength again in this chart. Everyone's talking about it breaking higher again, but we still haven't broken above that level in January. And as I've said before, my thesis has been this .com bubble 2000 top is what we're seeing here repeat. And it's funny how if you look at it, I mean this market made a high in March 2000, made a high, and then it wasn't until late US summer, so late August, that we broke, tried to get up again above that high and didn't make it, and then that was the start of the decline. And that's similar time scale to what we're talking about at the moment in 2018, 2007. Different kind of top there, not that sort of more of a kind of head and shoulders pattern there. It sort of stuck around for more like a year around that level, but I think we're more likely to turn down here. I don't see the market going higher. I could talk about some of those other stocks, some of the bellwether stocks that make up the US market, and the tech leaders in particular, not looking great. There hasn't been that recovery. I think there's Facebook chart in particular. Look at that. It's not. I don't think people are buying the dip this time. I think maybe this is the point at which people stop buying the dip, or the number of people buying the dip is outnumbered by people who think maybe this is a major turning point in some of these companies. So I think that in particular looks a very weak chart. Same with Netflix. These companies obviously aren't the US market in general, but they have been the leaders, and I think that's a weak looking chart. No one buying the dip there after these big down days, and it looks like a strong trend reversal and going to head lower for a while. The only two really holding it up still, Amazon and Apple, are still in those good uptrends. And you couldn't say those were weak charts. Apple in particular is really sort of broken out again, and almost sort of going in this parabolic almost a little in the last couple of weeks. So you can see there it's starting to get pretty a little bit overbought. But these obviously, as we saw here, it can stay overbought for a long time. So they're the two that are really holding it up. But I think the market is starting to turn. Tesla is another, it's not a huge company, but it's a bit of a bellwether stock for the tech sector, I think. And we've seen that try to top out after it had that, Musk was saying he was going to go private and everything. So that's starting to top out. Had a big fall on Friday, down about 8%, I think. So starting to see some bearish action in some of these bellwether stocks. The gold stocks in general have been where the action is in the last couple of weeks. Even though I think in the last few videos I talked about, even though the gold price was weak, the gold stocks hadn't sold off, and that was until the last couple of weeks. We broke on the GDX, we broke this 21 level where we'd been for 18 months, and just in the last 3 or 4 days, you can see huge volume capitulation type selling there, and coming back to the lows of December 2016. So, I think that capitulation volume there looks positive to me as a potential buying opportunity. That's way high volume. It's highest volume days we've seen since 2016. So I think potentially there's a bit of a buying opportunity here. Be selective in some of the gold stocks, so you're getting into, because the GDX does have some large cap producers who have had a lot of problems in the last few years and aren't necessarily good companies. But I'll talk about in a separate video some of the gold stocks where I think the value is starting to emerge, and that's in the producers that, especially to some of the Australian producers who have they've outperformed in the last year, but then in the last couple of weeks have had massive falls, and potentially there's some value starting to appear there. But you want to go to the top of the tree, I think, and not some of the speculative developers and stuff are still going to be under pressure until the gold price really turns around. But if we keep going lower on the GDX, I think the next logical level is kind of around this 17 sort of level, which was the breakout in early 2016. So that's the next level I'd be looking at. But as I said here, that when you start to see that real heavy volume, I think we might have seen a low. We might be starting to see a low or a potential for a base to form here. You had it here in mid 2015, where that was when it really broke down there, and that set the low. It took another 6 months for it to base there, but I think we might see something here similar here. Probably won't get that immediate snapback. It may base for a while, but I think we're probably going to start to form a base here around this level. Obviously, this is in US dollars, so if you were buying the GDX in Australian dollars, it's different levels. The GDXJ, I think, is a similar looking chart. Yeah, so you can see there it's clearly broken through key levels, holding around that December 2016 low. So very similar looking chart, but some of the juniors are probably going to be a bit weaker in the short term. I think maybe if the money does start coming, it's going to look for those producers. That's generally what we see in these drops in the gold stocks. And then the money will start to flow back to the better companies first, the producers, and that's where I'm looking, and that's a logical place. So that's where I'm looking at the moment. Gold is obviously been extremely weak, but with that breakdown and of this sort of downtrend, I think that's starting to see a bit of capitulation type selling. A lot of people are bullish on US dollar again. Even though we're only sort of a couple of weeks in that sort of bullish narrative, and it seems like everyone is on one side of the boat again. Short positions in gold are new record highs, and everyone thinks US treasuries are going, yields are going higher, and all this dollar index is going to 110. So all that's starting to get a bit, the amount of talk is starting to sort of make me feel like we might be starting to feel a bit of a snapback here in some of these markets. And when everyone gets on one side of the boat, it's usually a turning point. So that doesn't mean that gold's going to snap back and go back to 1300 or anything, but potentially a rally maybe toward this 1250 sort of zone is what I'm thinking in the next, say month. But we'll need to wait and see.